The original context of the Bible is not understood, is what I was told, that it will cause a lot of trouble on the earth. And it is, mostly by people who claim that the Bible cannot, or their interpretation of the Bible cannot be challenged. Otherwise, you're sinning against God. No, I'm sorry, but the Bible is there for discussion. And I don't have to absolutely accept everything somebody says about it. Just the contrary, in fact. So, all that was done. Mother did take me to other places. I was shown the future. I will give reference to that.
My guest today is Ken Lett, who had an incredibly detailed near-death experience when he was only 8 years old. From the vantage point of heaven, he saw souls rising into heaven from the earth. He saw a cord that held him back to his body, and he had a very unique experience with an archangel. And since then, he has gained some abilities that have allowed him to see the future. As a result, he made a prediction a while back about President Trump before he was in office that actually came true, and his videos have exploded with over 1 million views. And today, I'm going to talk to him about all of these experiences and some of the future events that he has uncovered that are yet to come. So stay tuned. And Ken, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Lori. Yes, nice to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah, I'm glad to help. If I can answer some questions, I'll gladly do that. Whatever.
Wonderful. Well,
Um,
you have a very unique perspective. I don't get a chance to to interview a lot of people who've had near-death experiences under
mm.
the age of, say, 15.
Oh,
Fairly unusual, but what I love about this is I feel like it's another amazing confirmation for these experiences, because
mhm.
you would think at the age of 8 that a memory would fade over time. Yet for
Mm.
you, it's as vivid today as it was when you had it when you were 8 years old. Why do you think
Right.
that is?
I think the experience became a part of me, as
Mm,
if it's my skin, my hands, my everything. It's ingrained in me. So it's not just a memory, it's part of me.
wow.
And I can still recall the sense of being in the realm, heaven, with my creator. I remember that. I remember the warmth and the glow and the light and the feeling of peace and the acceptance. It's part of me. If I'm really under stress and I'm in a really frightening situation, somehow I just know to consciously reach out to that, and I know that I'm protected.
So why don't you share, since you were only 8 years old, why don't you share your near-death experience in any way you would like to tell us about it?
Okay. Well, I'll throw in a little tidbit, something that I've never mentioned before. My father, his name is Lyle. We lived in a very small town. That's where I was born. And my father built the house that, well, when they brought me back from the hospital, that's the house that I lived in my entire life. My dad built it. Um, he just before I had my near death, he's an avid hunter, and he hunted ducks and geese on the river close to our town. And so he had his duck calls and goose calls, and he got into practicing a lot, and he went to something called the World Goose Calling Championship. But I believe it was in Iowa, and it was sponsored by a company that made duck and goose calls. But he won, and I believe it was like a $500 savings bond. Well, then I turned around and got sick and had my near death and had to go to the hospital. And he had to cash in that bond to pay for the operation.
Wow. Well, actually, what a blessing to have had that happen.
But the world goose calling champion, and we've got pictures and newspaper articles. And I remember phone calls, people that my parents hadn't heard from in years. People were calling to congratulate him, and it was a real happy time in our family.
An
Uh,
awesome legacy. I love it.
really proud of my dad too.
That's
Yeah.
great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. But oh yeah, he had a very tall, well, my brother still has a very tall trophy that sat on our piano at home. I think it was at least 2 foot tall. It was a huge trophy. Okay, so getting back to the near death. So 8 years old. Um, I came home from grade school, the third grade. Um, wasn't feeling too well, and this was early November. And my mother told me years later that I'd come home a couple of times not feeling well, but I always got around it. And then she sent me back to school, but came home one day just feeling not too well. Um, it was time for dinner, and my mother had made one of my favorite dishes. Um, and I felt hungry, and I started to eat, but I couldn't hang on to it. And then there was all of a sudden violent vomiting, and you know, kids, they do that kind of stuff. So, but the thing was with me, the vomiting didn't stop. It continued, and it was to a point where I was so empty that I was vomiting up bile because I remember yellow stuff coming out of me, and it burned something terrible. And this went on for like days. My parents tried to give me water, juice, anything they could to help me. And I didn't really have a high fever, I don't believe. I'm kind of stretching my memory here, but I don't think there was much of a fever involved. But I know my parents were very concerned. I mean, to the point that they called a local doctor. But I also know that my mother was, she was, it was hard for her to call people and ask for help. So I'm sure she tried to explain to the doctor what she thought it was, and I think he just went with it. And she said, I think he has the flu, and he went along with it. But they were worried enough to call. So I couldn't really drink any fluid because it kept causing more vomiting. So I just stopped. I refused all fluid and just suffered on the couch and watched TV. But this went on for days. So I believe I think I came home like a Thursday or a Friday after school and I was sick. And then the following Monday, my dad had to go to work. And his job, sometimes he was on the road. And that particular Monday, he was. So he was out of town. Um, when my near death happened, I, well, I don't want to go into too much detail on the suffering, but it was pretty miserable. My mother also had a job. Dad was out of town. Mom had me and the other two kids, sent them off to school, and then she got a phone call from her boss. She was going to stay with me, but her boss begged her to come into work for just half a day, a couple hours, something. She was reluctant to leave me alone, but she did. And knowing me, I'm sure I told her, this is fine, Mom. I had the phone number memorized for calling her at work. And while she was gone, I got extremely thirsty. And I think it was just dehydration that kicked in. And it was unbearable. I had to have fluid, even though I knew that I might vomit. So I went to the kitchen and got a glass of water. I remember I didn't finish it. I just dropped it. And then I got real hazy, fuzzy, and I just collapsed and fell on the floor. Um, And I just lay there for a while. I didn't know what was going on. And then like my eyesight just faded. All the color faded from color to white in my vision. So I'm laying on my back and I'm looking around and the color just disappeared slowly into a white haze until I was completely surrounded by white. I'm not so sure that that was the beginning of a death right there. Um, but I knew who I was and I knew that I was on the floor, but then the colors started coming back and then I could see again. So I decided, well, I can't stay on the floor. And I got onto my hands and knees and I crawled to the couch in the living room. I couldn't stand up. So I crawled and I lay there for a while. It didn't feel right. It felt like something was out of place in my gut. So I kind of turned and stretched, and something in my belly kind of popped. And it almost felt like an itch when it happened, like I scratched an itch and then it felt better, something like that. But it kind of popped. And then it was like a minute or two later, I started feeling a lot better, like I wasn't so sick to my stomach anymore. I felt better. And I thought about getting up to play, but I was so weak, I just lay there. And then my mother came home. I explained everything to her, but she wouldn't let me get up. I didn't want to anyway. I was too weak. But she was extremely worried when I told her about falling down. Um, I'm sure she felt pretty bad about leaving me alone too. But anyway, so she sent the kids off to school. My brother and sister, she sent them off to school the next morning and then immediately got me dressed and said, "We're going to the doctor. That's it. There's no arguing." I'm not even sure she had an appointment. She just took me. But at the small town of, I think at the time, 1,400 people, maybe 1,500, and we had two doctors. So I don't even think she really had to have an appointment. She just took me. Doctor put me on his examining table and looked at me. I was really pale. I mean, super pale. And then he poked me in the under my ribs in the gut, and I jumped. It hurt. It was the first time my gut really hurt. Before that, I was just sick to my stomach, but that time it hurt, and I yelped. And he he knew he knew it was my appendix. Um, very worried. He was very excited, and just told my mother that you need to take your kid up to the hospital immediately. He needs an operation. I will make all the calls. I make all the arrangements. You just go now. And she kind of argued with him. She wanted my dad to know in advance, but she couldn't. There's no way to call him and reach him. Not this happened in 1963 when I was 8 years old. So, yeah, she took me up to the hospital. The nurses were, great nurses, really friendly. And they took a man's razor to my belly and shaved me, which I thought was really odd because, I was only 8. I didn't have any kind of a hair on my chest, at least not that I was aware of. um, but they explained to me that this is what they do to prepare someone for an operation. And it started to sink in that something was really serious. And then my mother was, well, obviously frightened. And she kept leaving the room to make phone calls from their front office to try to call my dad. So she was making phone calls trying to reach people that could help her, that kind of thing. And so the operation had to go on without him. And when the nurses they worked together and they lifted me and put me on this table like with wheels. I guess it was called a gurney. uh, when I realized they're going to wheel me away from my mother, that's when I started to get really frightened. And I know I cried, but I was just so sick, you know. And I remember that one of the nurses was an older woman, and she was a little bit rough, a little bit mean. And I smelled something that I didn't like. It smelled chemical as they wheeled me down the hallway. And before we got to the operating room, which by the way looked metal like in a ship, big door, kind of clunked like a door in a ship. But the nurse kind of argued with me and said, that smell is nothing. Don't worry about it. And I said, but it smells awful. And I was crying. And she said, oh, that's just the rubber in the wheels of the gurney. Well, I knew it wasn't rubber. I knew she was lying. You know, I immediately didn't trust her. But they got me into the operating room, and on the table, you know, when there's an operation, there's a big array of lights, very bright, kind of blinded me. And then in a rush, straps were put across my chest, my shoulders, my arms were pinned down. I couldn't move. And that scared me because I didn't like being pinned. And then it was a small county hospital. Uh, they they didn't have any kind of an injection at the time, or in that place anyway. They couldn't inject me to put me out, so they used ether. And I remember the ether smelled really bad too. Supposedly ether doesn't have a smell, but perhaps the stuff they use medically, maybe it has an odor added to it. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I haven't smelled it since. Well, frightened to, you know. I imagine I could have gone somewhere to smell it, but didn't want to. I've had it, no more. So, but they put a screen over my face, and I remember it had a rubber cushion around it, kind of, and it had a screen over that, and then they put like a terry towel or a washcloth over that, and I believe that's what they poured the ether onto, so that I was surrounded by the fumes in my face and I couldn't breathe anything but ether. And then the nurse, the kind of mean one, she kept telling me she wanted me to compete like I was blowing up a balloon and she was going to beat me, you know. I didn't take her serious at all. I kind of thought she's kind of dumb for even suggesting it, but you know, she wanted me to struggle like she wanted me to try like I was blowing up a balloon. So I tried my best to do it without realizing that when I did that, I was taking in deep breaths of, you know, ether. Well, when the ether hit me, um, it was like my consciousness or my, well, when I was a kid, I remember describing it and I said it felt like my head was detached from my body. And then there was a strong sensation of orbiting my body around and around and around. So when I was little, I described it as my body was the earth, my head was the moon, is what it felt like. And it orbited several times before everything went just black. And then I don't know how long I was unaware of myself. I don't know how long that took place, but I started to realize that I could still think. It was like self-awareness came to me like it had to grow. It was like a tiny little thing in the middle of the vast universe, but it started to grow almost, well, in past years, I've called it like I was an amoeba that split and then divided and then grew and copied itself. It just kept growing and growing and growing. until I came to the realization that I was still me. But I also remember as distinctly there was thoughts that weren't mine. Or when I was really little, I described it as a voice that came to me. And it just simply asked, do you want to live or do you want to die? What do you want to do? Well, being really little and I was afraid anyway, I chose to live. I want to live. And then that just seemed to set things in motion. Like I had that control and I chose it. And then I went on. So I continued to exist. I wonder, but I'm certain that if I'd chosen to die, I think my soul at that moment would have just gone up to heaven. But no, I was frightened and I didn't want to die. And so I chose to live. So I started to see things around me and I started to hear things. And it was because I didn't understand that I was separated from my body. I was still me, as far as I knew. I'm here. Everything's fine. But I noticed that I couldn't see anything. It was so dark, and I couldn't hear anything anymore. And I wanted those things back. So slowly, those things started coming back to me. And the more I struggled to see, the more I could see. One of the I haven't mentioned this for quite a few years, but one of the first things I saw was like a really terrible car accident happening on Earth. I was an observer, something like something like a bird flying in the air, and I could fly around the situation and I could see everything. I saw a terrible car accident, and um, there was a girl and then two older people in the car, and the two older people died, and I saw them leave their bodies and go up. The little girl was injured pretty bad. She was still in the car. But what was really terrible is another car came up behind them. So apparently they were on their way to the same destination. So the car came up behind them, stopped, and it was a relative. And she kept screaming because she came up on her dead grandparents. And then I guess it must have been her sister or some relative that was also in the car. She kept screaming and screaming. And I was like thinking, isn't somebody going to help them? But then that ended. Um, then I started seeing spirits rising up from the planet. And at the time, I didn't really realize in the moment that they were dead, but I saw spirits rising up from the earth. And the crazy thing is, as they were rising up and I observed them, I also understood a little bit about them. Um, I knew that one was a woman and she was very kind, very sweet. There was a man, and I believe he was a minister or a priest. But I'm almost certain he was a Catholic priest because I remember seeing a lot of stained glass windows in reference to him as he came up. Um, oh, I also now, wow, I just now remembered there were a lot of people praying for him at the time. Okay. Ooh, I got chills.
Love that you just shared that. How cool, because you said at
Oh,
the beginning, I don't want to interrupt your story, but I think it's worth saying that you have, even though this happened so long ago, when you tell it again, sometimes you get a new memory that just pops in that you weren't consciously aware of before.
it's confirmation. It's a clarification.
Ah,
Yeah.
how cool.
Wow.
So you were
I'm
you were seeing the
sorry.
priest with the, Go
I
ahead.
have to apologize. I might get a little bit
That's
emotional.
okay.
That was really beautiful.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're with
Um,
you're seeing the man that with the stained glass windows,
mm,
and then you know that people are praying for him. That was where you were at.
yeah, yeah. And I also saw that I saw two spirits really up close. So I saw a woman and I saw that like this minister or priest. I saw others, but they all looked older to me. But see, I was 8. My reference at the time was still a little kid. They looked like they were like my grandparents, older. Um, so they also were smiling and very happy. And there was like no hesitation in these spirits. They just went up. Nothing held them back. That was when I started to wonder why they were going up and I wasn't. I think by then I started to realize that I was no longer in my body, that I shouldn't be able to see everything I'm seeing, but I did. And I was starting to question, who am I? What am I doing here? Kind of stuff. More, it was, what am I doing here? That's when I discovered that I had a rope or a tether coming out of my spiritual body going down a long distance. And I remember kind of tracing it or following it and realizing that I was attached to my body. It was on the operating table so I could view it. And it was like I was a balloon up in the sky with a string. And so every time I tried to move a little bit, spiritually, when I tried to move a little bit, the tether would stop me and hold me in place. So I just quit trying. Um, I also remember that minister, that priest-like guy, he stopped and saw me. And he was saying, you shouldn't stay here. You should be going on like others, like me. And I told him I couldn't. So he tried to help me and I couldn't move. And then, so he finally gave up and he said, I'm going to go on and I will tell them that you're down here. I remember him saying that. And I agreed with him. I said, okay, but I didn't know who he was talking about. He tried to help me. And so that went on. And then it was a short time after I saw those spirits rising up, I started realizing that I was no longer alone. Like somebody's looking at me, is the way it felt. So I started observing my surroundings, which were just black. But I started asking, is there somebody there? Is there something going on? And then I started hearing some noises like, I don't know, shuffling or like people talking. So it got my attention, I was looking over to see what was going on. Eventually, I realized that I was being observed, and I saw sets of eyes off in the darkness, and there was at least 3 of them. So I started looking at them real close, curious, wondering what they are, what they're doing. But then all of a sudden, I realized that my thoughts were no longer private. Every time I was thinking something about them, they knew it. And then their thoughts came to me. And when they came to me, it was frightening because they were angry and they didn't like me and I didn't know why. And I was on the defense. And so I entertained fear, a lot of fear. I'm sure the fear partly carried over from being on the table and having an operation, but I started entertaining fear and questioning in my mind, who are they? Who are you? What do you want? What are you doing? And they just came after me. When they realized that I was frightened and I couldn't move, they started to play with me and push me around and laugh and giggle and tease me. And I would tell them to leave me alone and they would imitate me. It was, now what's weird is I know that I was communicating with everything around me spiritually, telepathically, but to me, it felt like I was actually using words. And they imitated my voice, my words, only it didn't sound like they understood English. They understood my thoughts, but it was like somebody from another country that doesn't speak English just imitating the sounds I made, but not really knowing what they meant. So that's what it felt like anyway. That's the way I recall it. So their attacks against me got increasingly violent because the more they pushed me around, the more frightened I got. So it escalated them and what they were doing. They got bolder and more, well, more powerful almost. It was almost like I was allowing them to attack me, but I didn't know it. Um, and they beat me up pretty good, to the point I couldn't see any end to it. And somehow inside me, I decided I've had enough of this. I want it to stop. Please make it stop. And so I remember specifically saying, please, God, make them stop. But at 8 years old, I didn't really realize calling out to God was a possibility. I was just calling out for help. But the words I used, I must have heard like older people saying it. Maybe I heard it in church. I don't know. But I said, please, God, make them stop. And calling for help like that apparently made the difference because all of a sudden, these spirits that were attacking me, and by the way, they were like children, just like me. Um, them attacking me suddenly slowed down or stopped or wasn't so violent. And they got really angry with me because I was calling out for help. And they told me to shut up and I wouldn't. I think somehow I understood that if I called out for help, that I might be able to get away from them. So I kept calling out for help. And then just right after, I heard a voice in the distance answer, and it wasn't those angry spirits. It was a gentle, kind voice. Someone that I just knew as a child that I could trust them, that they wanted to help me, or it wanted to help me. So I kept calling out, and those angry spirits tried to stop me, but the voice kept coming closer. And as it did, those angry spirits, they had to just disappear. They had to go away. I didn't know why, but I was glad. So I stayed pretty frightened and I kept asking for help. And the spirit, I guess it was a spirit that was calling out to me, kept answering, asking me to keep trying, keep calling. And I did. And then it finally found me. And it felt like it had to come down to me. This is what it felt like. And then suddenly it was there. And those spirits that attacked me, they were long gone and they weren't coming back. So at first, I couldn't really see what this entity or this spirit was that came to find me. I couldn't see it at first. And I remember asking, why can't I see you? I can hear you, but why can't I see you? And it simply said, you have to learn how to look. You have to learn how to look for me. And then he said, just look. And it was a male. And when he said that, all of a sudden I could see it. I, and I'm sure I said something like, I can see you, I can see you. And I was pretty excited. And he was happy. And there was a lot of joy that filled me when I could see it. Something was actually purposely communicating with me, something that I could trust. Or at least I felt I could trust it. So we had some conversation. I remember that. I remember asking it who he was or why he came to help me. And the answer was, well, you called out to God, didn't you? And yes, I did. But I didn't really expect to be answered. Um, and he said, well, I heard you. So I've come to help. And then he spent some time assessing the situation. He asked me why he he had me try to move up, like as if I had died, I guess. And I couldn't. And then I explained to him, I tried that, but I got this thing stuck to me, this cord. So he understood that perfectly. And then he followed the cord down into the operating room and he saw my body down there. And then he came back and he talked to me and he said, I'm going to have to help you because it looks like things aren't going so well down there. So I knew that the operation was not quite going the way they hoped. And we talked in reference to God somehow. Oh, I remember he had the ability to look in the history of my life on earth. And I somehow had mentioned to him that I knew about God through church or going to Sunday school. But my concept was really weak, you know, and been told a lot of things that I didn't really understand. And he knew that. But he was looking for reference to things going on in my life. And he picked out an incident in church. I guess my Sunday school when I was really little, we were singing in front of the congregation. Churches, they do that kind of stuff. But we were singing Jesus Loves Me. And he showed me a time when I wasn't singing it right. And a little guy next to me, he was a classmate of mine. Um, he stopped me and told me I wasn't singing it right, and he told me the right words. And I remember looking at the congregation in that incident. I was reliving it, and the congregation was laughing and really enjoying it because they're watching us little kids, try to sing. And I actually, in spirit, sang "Jesus loves me" for him. The spirit that was there. I sang it spiritually. He asked me to sing it, and I did. Jesus loves me, this I know. And he really enjoyed it. I know that too. And then there was a point where he kept communicating up above us to someone or something above us. It was like they were calling down to him and he was calling back to them. And I remember there was kind of a yellowish light up there. Um, So I asked him what he was doing, and he told me that he was communicating above me, above us, to find out who was my family or who I was connected to. But what's weird is, this is where I know we were speaking telepathically or spiritually, but yet I distinctly remember him using words or a language that I didn't recognize when he called up to talk. Um, but I asked him, what are you asking or what are they saying? And the answer was, we're trying to find your family up there. He might have said heaven, but I still didn't put two and two together. And then finally, word came to him that it would be all right, I guess, to send me up. So he told me, I'm being called to go to other places. I would stay with you, but I need to send you up. So, oh yeah, he had a sword and a horn. Ah, and a flowing white robe. I remember that. And he was a very beautiful man. I mean, physically very pleasant to look at. Very gentle, loving voice. And I asked about his sword. I asked about the horn. He told me that God was going to ask him to use the sword in the future to cut away and remove the darkness in the world. That there was a major battle coming and that he would be asked to fight in that battle. The horn, I don't remember what he told me about that. I guess during battle, I have an image of him in battle blowing the horn and then fighting. Um, but he took out that sword. He was told to send me up, I guess. We took out the sword and he cut my tether. And then he said, "Don't worry, you'll be safe." And then he put me in an enclosure. I describe it as a bubble. And then he put me in this. It was like an energy field. And he told me that it would protect me. And then he said, "It will take you up where the others went." So that's what he did. And I just kept floating up above the earth. I floated and I noticed that I was above the earth. And I know the earth is round, by the way, everybody that's listening, the earth is round. And I saw specks of light on dark places, like where it's nighttime on the earth. And I believe that would have been like streetlights. But I also saw like sparks of light on the surface that would go out, and then there'd be a streak of light up into the universe, outer space, just like I had gone. Somehow I understood those were spirits. When people pass away, they they turn into like a glowing ember and they fly up, head to heaven. And I saw them. I saw them leaving the planet. But I also know that they kind of congealed and came into like tubes. And so there were like several tubes leaving and going off the planet. And then I suddenly realized I was in a tube as well. And I realized that there were people around me. One guy was Asian. I didn't understand his language. He was speaking a language I did not recognize. But he was like, "Isn't this?" He was like he was saying, "Isn't this something? This is marvelous." He was really awestruck. We kept going up together until there was a tube or a spiral up above us. When I was little, I described it as a whirlpool because it kept spinning, and our tube went up there. And then I got spit out. The others that were with me got spit out. We're all separated. So my experience again, I was singular, alone. And I remember going through a tunnel, and it was kind of a bumpy ride, but it was pleasant, if that's feasible. But I also remember associate a lot of deep, rich colors, like ruby red and royal blue, um, brilliant gold colors, just going up through the tunnel. And then the tunnel was kind of an escalation, and then almost like a gentle roller coaster. And then when it was over, it was kind of like I was spit out. It was like sudden, and then it was quiet. While I was in the tube, I could hear other people. I could hear them. But when I got out of the tube, it was absolutely dead quiet again and dark. Um, but I knew that I was floating and going up more. There was a sensation of floating, and then I came up to a barrier, and it was like a fluffy, puffy cloud, and it was very soft. I didn't stay there very long before two hands reached out through that barrier and grabbed me like by the shoulders and pulled me up. I was out of the bubble and sat down, and then I was like in front of somebody, and it was a man. He had the same kind of slacks on that I see my father wear, the same period clothing. And he kept asking questions about who are you? And um, I think he was asking, I think he knew that we were related, but he didn't know how. And I didn't know how. Um, so he finally gave up. He was very happy-go-lucky, though. He tried to make me feel at ease. So he said, well, there's others up here. I believe he described them as relatives. And he said, let's go talk to them. And he took me up to them. I met that what they turned out to be were both sets of my great-grandparents through my dad's parents. So my living grandparents, they both had parents, and those are the people I met. So they were great-grandparents through my dad. So they were trying to help me and trying to figure out who I was. And I don't know, maybe it was my confusion. Now, might be something I have to correct, because when I'm describing all this, I'm describing the confusion that I felt because this is a memory strong in me. So I remember feeling a lot of confusion as to where I was. Who are these people? Now, other near-death people have said they met relatives and they knew who they were, or those relatives knew them. Well, in my case, I didn't know these people. So maybe all I'm really describing is my confusion, not theirs. It's very possible. But I remember a big aha moment when they asked me specifically, what is your name? Tell us, what is your name? And I said, Kenneth, my name is Kenneth Lett. And then they were asking, well, who is your father? And I said, my father's name is Lyle. And then they were like, we know your father. We knew him when he was really little. We're his grandparents. And the concept of my father having grandparents, not just parents, but grandparents, people that he had never mentioned. Of course, I was only 8. I probably wouldn't have been told about them anyway. I don't know. In my family, they didn't talk about dead people, so you know. But it took me a minute for it to all just soak in, and then I suddenly realized, oh, these two people are my grandma's mom and dad, and these two people are my grandpa's mom and dad. And they were saying, yes. And then it was like a big aha moment, and it all just sort of soaked in, and it was like a celebration. Then all of a sudden, I remember lots of people trying to talk to me at once. And it was confusing, and there was so much, and I couldn't sort it out. So the two great grandmothers kind of, I don't know if you call it protection. I didn't need protection. I was safe. But I don't know. I think they tried to help me sort out my feelings and my thoughts. And they tried to help me answer one thing at a time as I was asked questions. But suddenly a lot of people came and wanted to say hello to me because they knew my father or they had known my father. I'm not so sure that I didn't meet a couple of men who were killed in World War II. Uh, my father, by the way, did not have to fight. His two brothers did. One went to Germany, actually helped release prisoners from a concentration camp. Another uncle fought in the Philippines, and he was there when they were pushed away and had to go back. But my father, he was the youngest. The way he described it was he was sitting on the dock, New York City, waiting to get on a troop transport ship when the end of the war was declared with Germany. And he was there in New York for all the celebrating. So he didn't have to go. And so I think I'm talking a little bit in circles, but telling my story to my dad years later, when I was capable and able to tell him what I saw and felt, he immediately knew that the man that pulled me out through the barrier, pulled me out of the bubble through the barrier. I was labeled a slow kid, but I wasn't. Because of my near death, I was daydreaming an awful lot in school. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm backtracking. But so I know a woman that told me that she told me that she was my dad's teacher. From there, one of my great grandmothers told me that somebody special was coming for me, and that I should go along with it. Everything would be okay. It was kind of like she gave me permission to leave. So another spirit came for me, and it was a woman, older woman, and she called to me, and she wanted to take me and asked me permission to take me with her, and I said okay. She told me that my family had a very long history and she wanted me to see it. So she took me deeper, I believe, into heaven. And she took me up to a place. She glowed and she was full of love. Now, at this point in my life, I just call her mother because she was the ultimate feeling of being at home, safe with your mother. And she took me and she sort of waved an arm, and then another opening happened. And this one looked more solid. And when I looked into it, it was like a tunnel, and then I could see steps in it, and each step apparently represented another generation of my family going back until that tunnel went all the way back to a bright, brilliant yellow light where I saw a very old man. So I believe that old man probably was one of the earliest of my family. I think I saw at least 10, 15 generations, maybe further. So this mother that was had taken me told me that there was this bright light at the end of the tunnel was coming to greet me. So this light kept coming closer and closer and closer, and then suddenly it transformed into a man. And I remember the man being very nice, friendly. He had a way of communicating with me that I just knew I was safe. He understood me. Um, I believe that man was Jesus, or a Jesus-like entity. He never told me his name, but I asked Mother at one point, "Who is this?" And she said, "On earth he went by many names, but may have been told his name is Jesus." So that's how I know it was Jesus. So Mother herself must have been Jesus' mother, Mary. So, but you know something? I wasn't raised Catholic, and I never really prayed to Mary when I was a kid. I was never told that she would answer. She was nothing to me as a child other than the mother of Jesus. Jesus was always stressed in my background and my teaching, what I've been taught, I mean. So anyway, I believe, just to make it sweet and short, I believe Mother Mary, and I believe it was Jesus. And Jesus took me away for a while and talked to me. And that's where I felt this incredible sense of belonging, love, joy, a penetrating light that went completely through me. It purified me. It corrected anything about me that was wrong, that was imperfect. We joined together. We were one in that light, is what it felt like. And that I belonged there. It was my source. It was heaven. And uh, he took me up to God as I was taught. Through Jesus, you meet God. is the way it felt. And then privately, God and I had a conversation. I don't remember everything. I do remember reference to the cross and Jesus dying on the cross. I remember being told um, that when I do good on earth, that it rewards me, but it also brings more love. It generates love. It brings about good things for everyone around me. And then I believe he also told me that he was going to send me back to Earth, but that memory didn't come back to me for a long time. I've shared this conversation. The details of the conversation with God were really hazy until I started talking about it. Gosh, I think I first was interviewed in 2015. Yeah. So I've been talking about it for about 10 years. Details are still coming to me, but I'm sorry, today they're not. But anyway, um so that ended and Jesus took me back to Mother. She had me experience the open universe full of knowledge by myself. I felt like I was just flying anywhere I wanted to go. I experienced a lot of vibrations up there. Vibration still has a strong influence on me, especially the low, rumbling, deep ones. The deeper, the better, because it really gets my attention. And I associate God's voice with a deep, powerful rumble. And it was a voice that permeated, penetrated everything. Mother, I guess you can call it, gave me a tour of heaven. She showed me more than that tunnel and my invitation or my greeting with Jesus. Jesus went on and did other things, left me with Mother. So I was sent out into the endless knowledge of the universe. And I remember as the knowledge came to me and I understood it perfectly, every question I would have had was there to be answered. Knowledge just all I had to do was think about something and then the answer would be there. But I was more just kind of taking a tour and knowledge was coming to me. And then I remember telling myself, this place is familiar. I've been through this before. Well, then I was living on Earth. Why couldn't I remember it? It was like old knowledge was coming back to me, is what it felt like. Excuse me. So mother took me back and then she showed me other things in heaven. I remember witnessing a choir and it was an awful lot like a Mormon tabernacle with women on either side singing, like in bleachers on either side of me. Some of the most beautiful music I ever heard. It was like classical music. And then I really got into it because I love music anyway. And I was like directing the music. I would choose the next note and then they would sing it. And it was so beautiful. I saw that. I remember a vision of a Bible or the Bible, a big book, lots of pages flipping. And as the pages flipped, the information on those pages came to me. So I believe I was shown like the entire Bible was just downloaded into me. But I can't recall. I read stories to this day and I don't recall some of this stuff. I still remember weird things that I don't know. I don't have a photographic memory of the Bible, but yet if somebody like yourself were to tell me a Bible story or quote something, sometimes the meaning of it comes to me before you're finished, if that makes sense. I remember being told that the Bible is not correct, that it's being misinterpreted, that it's being used for political reasons. Huh, how about that? I remember being told that, well, I wasn't told specifically, but I have a strong understanding that the Bible was written by mankind. And it really irks me when I hear religious people saying, do you accept that the Bible is the Word of God? Yes, through men. He communicated to men who then interpreted and wrote it down. And then that interpretation has been interpreted many times since. The original context of the Bible is not understood, is what I was told, that it will cause a lot of trouble on the earth. Excuse me. And it is. Mostly by people who claim that the Bible cannot, or their interpretation of the Bible cannot be challenged. Otherwise, you're sinning against God. No, I'm sorry, but the Bible is there for discussion. And I don't have to absolutely accept everything somebody says about it. Just the contrary, in fact. So all that was done. Mother did take me to other places. I was shown the future. I will give reference to that in the next video. So I need to end my visit to heaven though. So I'm back with mother. Mother took me back to my great-grandparents. So we were talking again. And mother told me the time has come that you have to make a choice. You can stay up here with us, or you need to go back to Earth. You need to go back to your body. And I couldn't decide. I was having so much fun up there. It was so enjoyable. At one point, mother showed me a chair. By the way, when I met one of my great-grandfathers, he was sitting in a tall chair like this one that I'm sitting in now. I know this came out of a church, probably Catholic. Like I say, though, I'm not a Catholic and I'm not I don't practice Christianity anymore. Um, but I was offered a chair, and this one was more modern with a short back. And I didn't understand why a chair. And I was told to sit in it, and I thought it was fine. And like a little kid, I kind of bounced around, but I got up again. And I asked, why a chair? Why would you offer me a chair? Mother told me, well, it would be a place of honor. That if you chose to stay, that chair would be yours. And it would be a place of honor for you to stay in forever. And I was like, I don't want to sit in a chair. I want to look around. I want to see stuff, you know? So I got up out of the chair and, and I was back talking to my great-grandparents. And it was, Ken, you're gonna have to make a decision. Are you gonna stay? You're gonna go back? I needed something else to help me decide. And then asked a question, and that was, can I go back to Earth and tell everybody I'm okay and then come back? And the answer was, nope. You either stay with us or you go down there. It's one or the other. Well, I couldn't decide still. And then mother came to me and said, your living mother on Earth is praying for your return. And she
Mm,
said, if you don't return, your mother is going to be very sad
mm,
and she's going to be very hurt.
yeah.
That's all I needed to hear. Then I was like, oh, well, there's no need for that. I'm fine. So I said, yeah, I don't want my mom to be sad, so send me back. Okay. So the return to my body, Eddie, the distant relative of mine that pulled me up, took me back to a place in that cloud and pushed me down, said goodbye and pushed me down. So long story short, I recognized that I was floating over my body, and then I entered My body was not in the operating room anymore. It was back in my room. The room had many relatives, including my mother, my living grandparents, a set of grandparents, and I believe my Aunt Virginia was there. But when I entered my body, I was like, oh, this is where I go. So my body was on its back in the bed. I entered through the back of my head and just slipped in feet first, from head down to toes, and slipped in. The second I was completely inside my body, I felt the sickness and the pain and the
Mhm.
ick,
Yeah.
and it hurt something terrible. And I remember just saying to myself, why did I come back for this? I didn't realize that was going to happen, but it
I
did.
bet.
Um,
Well, can I ask you 3 questions about
sure,
your
sure.
experience? And then we're going to continue because what I love about your experience, Ken, is how much detail you had for me. You had a lot of different things that happened to you on the other side. And I
Yeah.
also am so grateful that you had that remembrance of something
Mm,
new that you hadn't remembered before. But I want to make
yeah.
sure we're doing this justice because I want to have a second conversation with you where I let you share with everybody some of these future events because some of these have come true. And I think people will be very interested to come back and hear about that part. So the
Okay.
first question I have for you is about the being that you were with for a long time who reached
Mhm,
in, saw some of your memories, and then at the end you shared that that being had a sword and a horn and also
mhm,
a flowing cape and was very large and very pleasant to look at. Do you
mhm.
know now, after all these years, who that was?
I know it was an angel. I
Mm.
don't know which one by name. I don't think he ever told me his name. Um, I don't recall a name.
Was it an angel that would be like associated with you as a guardian angel or more like an archangel, do you think?
But see, I don't know the difference. An archangel, what, is closer to God? I don't know. I,
No, I think an archangel has a bigger overarching um experience with humanity versus a guardian angel assigned specifically to you, to your life that is always with you, watching you, where the archangels are interacting with many, 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 many souls, maybe potentially universal souls.
I don't remember being told his connection other than he was always in communication with heaven. I know that. And he was communicating that he was going to send me up, or they told him to do it. You know, when I was little, much younger, I used to pray to God, and because that angel had such a influence over me, I remember praying, please God, make me one of your soldiers.
Hmm.
So I associate that angel with fighting, with the sword. And then the vision he showed me, it wasn't just him, it was other angels. And it was, we will overcome the darkness.
Mm.
I also believe that our experiences on earth are very important because we bring experiences of love and power because of that with us. And I believe that's added to like a collection that humanity, every one of us, we bring something with us. And it's like our love is our power and it adds to the power in heaven and makes it stronger.
Mm.
That it's like somehow I know that a point in time, humanity will develop to the point that their job is done. That the collection of power of love will be strong enough to completely overcome the darkness. So
Okay.
we add to God's power. God is in us and he's growing through us, expanding. So that's why we have a lot better influence when we reach out and touch others and involve them and help them.
Yeah,
It's got,
absolutely. That was what you were talking about before that. You said
yeah,
that the goodness was part of the love, and I felt that as like a ripple effect.
mhm, exactly. So they, religions drive me nuts when they say, you must absolutely accept Jesus to enter heaven. If not, you will suffer in hell forever. Oh, please. No. All that God asks is we acknowledge that he's there. That's what saved me. And I was only 8. I don't believe like kids even younger, like infants when they die, I don't believe they have to go through that step. But it was something I went through. Maybe it was because of my tether. I don't know. I couldn't tell you that for sure because I wasn't really told why. But all I know is acknowledging God was the key.
Okay.
The existence of the
Important message.
creator.
Hmm.
That's that you're not a rock on an island.
Sure.
That we are connected and acknowledging that connection and acknowledging that somebody created me. I didn't come out of nowhere, that there's always a communication between us. That is what God requires. And then the path to heaven is open.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
I could be, guilty of all kinds of crimes and terrible things here on earth, but yet that channel is open.
I
That
agree.
oppor
I agree with that. I believe we all go to the same place.
Yeah, it's a collective, the hive mind.
Right. How could you not go? You can't separate you, so you can't go anywhere else because you are a part of the one.
And I can tell you that I know from experience being alone in the universe without that connection or not being aware of it is a terrifying place. So when people say you're going to go to hell, no, you're in hell until you acknowledge God. Until you open that channel yourself, you're in hell. Bad things are going to happen to you until you acknowledge God. It's just that simple. Churches try, well, okay, I don't
We can
want
go
to.
in too much of a tangent and we're
Yeah.
running out of time for today. So I want to ask you one more question that has just fascinated me about your experience with the grandparents. And I'm so glad that you had kind of an epiphany today when you were describing that maybe it was your confusion of being an 8-year-old,
Mhm.
not really being able to recognize or understand what they were asking about. Because the curiosity for me is, you said that those grandparents that you met were dead before you were born, which
Right.
means that your soul would have been on the other side with them at the same time before your soul came into this incarnation. And I would imagine that you
Oh,
would have already known them. So I wanted your thoughts on that.
I hadn't thought of it that way before. I no, I remember my past life before this one. I lived another life.
Mhm.
The only one I remember is one other though.
But
I
you would
dr
have gone back to the in-between space to plan this life. And wouldn't you have potentially known the relatives that were going to be part of that incarnation? Because I think we have a connection to the heritage, to the people that are make up part of our lineage, because they all have all these energies that can
oh, I see what you mean.
contribute to what you become ultimately when you pick a lineage to drop into.
Well, when I chose this life, I agreed to it. I
Hmm.
didn't know what it was going to be like, but
Oh, interesting. So
I
many of
chose
them see themselves planning with very, very exacting details, a
no,
lot
not
of
me.
who they're going to be in connection with on a soul level and what they're going to do. And they're picking their parents and they're picking where they live. I've heard that over and over and over again. But you
Oh,
didn't have that experience, I think, or
well,
memory.
again, I have memories of being in heaven my previous life and being questioned and with by several powerful entities, uh, a panel or a group of elders. I've heard
Hmm.
them described. They were trying to determine what to do with me, apparently, and I didn't answer the questions to a point that they decided to keep me. They decided to send me down here again for this
Oh,
life.
interesting. That's interesting because the perspective for you is that they, and for me, or maybe a lot of the people I've talked to, it's that I, as a soul, chose the experience. Not that I'm taking God out of anything, because
I
you
didn't
can't.
I didn't see myself down on earth at all when I chose this life. I was shown my parents. They were young adults in love. I know it's crazy, but they were in a living room in a house, laughing and joking, and a lot of joy in their hearts, and very much in love. And I was with, I guess it would have been my guardian spirit, who I thank very much, was telling me that um, I needed to go back to Earth to learn more,
Okay.
to become stronger. And then I was shown people on Earth, like in the living room of a house. I know the house, I know the living room, I know where it was. And it was my mom and dad when they were in their early marriage, and they were very happy. And I was told that I could be their child.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I was told I needed to experience love more to understand it better. And I could do it through these people down in
Hmm.
this living room. And so I got a feeling of the love that they shared between each other. And I said, hey, this is great. I love the laughter. I love the happiness. Sure, no problem. I'll go with them.
Oh, interesting. Well, I love it. I
Yeah,
mean, everybody's a new perspective. These are such individual
yeah,
experiences, as individual as fingerprints are to us, for sure.
yeah,
This has been
absolutely.
an interesting conversation. I appreciate you sharing the near-death part, and we're going to do a part two where
Right.
you're going to come back, and I'll release it probably a day or two after this interview, and we're going to
Okay.
talk about all the future things that we wanted to discuss. So to be
Okay.
continued, but thank you everybody today for watching.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. And hi, I love you.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.